Hi guys, my name is Michel with Michel Real Estate. Welcome back to another video on the Luxembourgish real estate market. And in this one, we'll be going through the rental application procedure here in Luxembourg. Now, I see a lot of people making mistakes out there, a lot of renters not knowing what to do, and a lot of landlords dropping the ball on certain procedural steps and thereby making huge mistakes and losing out on a lot of their cash flow. So stay tuned guys, this video is going to be extremely interesting for all you renters and investors out there. Let's get right into it. What do landlords want and why? The first thing that a landlord absolutely will require is that you are capable of covering the rent. Obviously, they usually apply a 1/3 rule, which means that once you have paid the rent, you are still left with 2/3 of your salary, meaning that only 1/3 of the salary will be spent on rent. Why do landlords do this? Well, quite simply because they know that sometimes things go wrong and you are expected to pay something else, which is a considerable payment, and you won't be able to cover rent anymore. So if you are, for instance, in a 50-50 deal with your tenants, this is an unfavorable situation for you because it is a very thin line of error which can be crossed very easily by the tenant, and you might end up with rent not being paid. A landlord will obviously also be looking for a tenant which has a fixed income, which means that the income comes in regularly and is absolutely assured to almost 100% that it will come in unless that employer will basically fire his employee, your tenant. Now, the fixed income is almost a necessity nowadays. It's because, well, if you are in a trial period as a tenant, chances are that you might not get the job in the end and that you will be fired, and the problem is that you will not be able to pay the rent. So the second thing is make sure that your tenants have a fixed income. Next up, you need to be able to get some documentation. So if you're not working with an agent, the future tenants should send you all the paperwork by email. In this paperwork, you tenants, you should include a copy of the ID and of your spouse's ID if required. You should send also the last 3 payslips from your employer and of course a copy of your work contract. If that's done, you're basically put in an application and it's up to the landlord to make a decision. Now, if you landlords work with an agent, the agent is not always allowed to send you all the documentation of all the possible candidates, simply because of the data protection regulations which are also in place in the real estate market. But once you have agreed on a certain tenant, you are still allowed to see the documentation as proof, of course. So agents should not be allowed to send you all the documentations, although some do. But there's a simple way to circumvent this. We simply can call our clients and tell them what we see. And once you agree on either this or that candidate, well, that's the moment where we can send you all the documentation as proof. You have received all the documentation from either the agent or from the future tenant, the ones that you are willing to accept as your future tenants. Before you move ahead, please verify all the documents. Make sure that this person or these people are actually still employed with their employer. A simple call to the company's HR department will solve that issue immediately, but please just do verify just to be sure. You have just invested some money into a property. It would be sad if some false documentation pops up and actually these people don't have a job and were looking to move out of their current situation as soon as possible and move into your unit, and now they're not paying, and so on and so on. I'm snowballing here, you can see where I'm going. That's not what I want. Just that little step, just verify the documentation just to be sure. Once everything is verified, we'll move on to the payments. Now, you already have the rental agreement prepared. You can send it to your tenants. They will agree or not agree on certain terms. You can work that all out amongst yourselves or with the agent who is handling your business. But next up comes, of course, the payments. So, in order for a tenant to move into the unit, never ever give the keys prior to any kind of payments being done, which means that the entire warranty needs to be transferred to you or be put on a blocked account. Now, I myself absolutely do not like the blocked account kind of deal. I don't like it. I prefer for all the tenants to simply wire the money to the landlord, and he has to keep that money and it will not be used as rent. Now, for some, it seems to be very difficult to kind of trust their landlord, but the legal documentation is there to basically prove it all. Now, what happens is that some people put it on a blocked account, but I have seen issues with these blocked accounts. I will not mention them in this video, so for you landlords or future investors out there, simply stipulate that you will not agree to a blocked account. If your future tenants don't agree on what you're setting forth as a clear step to moving on in the process, just move on to another tenant. Just move on. But once these payments are done, that's when we move on to inventory. Once all the payments have been done, we can move on to inventory, as I just mentioned. Now, inventory is a very important document which basically stipulates what kind of state the unit is in once the keys were handed over. But I've seen situations, many of them actually, where the landlord gave the key prior to the signing of the inventory documents. Now what happened is that basically the tenants did not agree with the landlords on the inventory document, were not willing to sign, but these are not basis for eviction. So you cannot evict someone if he does not agree on inventory. So in order to make sure that everything is moving along properly, the keys are to be handed over after inventory has been signed by both parties. Now, if there are any other damages that will be noted later on within the 2-week period, it should be included into the documentation as well, or simply be fixed by the landlord. So you have come to the end of the entire application procedure. You have done inventory, all the payments were done, you're ready to give over the key. And this is where most mistakes actually happen, is that the landlord is not visiting the unit on a regular basis in order to check if everything is in order and in working condition. It also implies that you are very involved in the unit and that you want to see if everything is going okay, if your tenants are doing fine. It is also a bit of a break for certain tenants to not let themselves go too much in a unit and think that it is simply theirs and that they can do with it however they please. Having regular checkups, and I'm talking twice a year, so every 6 months, a landlord should go and see the unit, see what kind of state it is in, see if there have been any changes made to the unit, and simply talk to the tenants and make sure that everything is going along smoothly. A lot of investors make this mistake of thinking, I have invested, I have found good tenants, they are paying me, I'm good and I don't need to check on my unit. But the thing is, if you have tenants which will live in your unit for the next 2, 3, 5, maybe even 10 years, and you have never ever checked the unit, you have no clue what state it will be in. So guys, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave me a comment if you have any questions. If you want to have any other advice, all my consultations are free. Just check out my other social media platforms or simply contact me on WhatsApp. Love you guys so much. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Again, my name is Michel with Michel Real Estate.